superintendents that feed into the Upper Bucks Tech School, since it wouldn't just impact in terms of our change. They would have some ripples there at both Palisades and Quakertown. And so that will be part of our policy recommendation next year in 2019. But we are not ready to make that recommendation tonight in terms of what we are suggesting. But it obviously would not come into play for a while anyway in terms of not changing the rules for tech school students. And so we'll talk about that in policy in early 2019.
Board members have any questions?
I think that we have used the term incorrectly consistently. That is the class rank term. It should be class rank index, which is what it was proposed as.
Okay.
And what it was used as, and that is something different. And it was implemented in part, that the advisor, as you call it, to encourage students to take more credits and to discourage students from sitting in a study hall. And I don't see anything in this proposal that benefits that part of it, in my opinion. I still think it's a bad choice. I know students may like being in study halls and text messaging or whatever they're doing, or doing their homework and so forth, but I think, frankly, their day should be busy when they are here at the high school. I think it's important that they study different things, and as many things as they can possibly jam into their schedules. And I know many do, but not all. And once this change is made, I think that will revert to more trying to put aside time for study halls and concentrating just on the classes, say the 4 or 6 AP classes, so that they can, so they'll play the game differently, but they'll still play the game, is my opinion.
And you know that I completely agree with you in terms of what the motivation is, and it should be for all of our students, not just the ones who might be playing a game to get to a certain part of the scale, that all of our students should be encouraged to take multiple courses and not be sitting in study halls. And so it is something that we're talking in terms of other policies that could be addressed, that would help that situation that you're speaking to, that obviously do not fall on here, but are policy recommendations to try to eliminate some of that withdrawal or whatever that would be that you're anticipating. But
the other comment I have is concerning the calculation of the GPA, or the class rank index for that matter, that we should be, especially those of us who have a mathematical background, should be very conscious of what the significant figures are. Currently, we award grades that have one significant figure. 4.8, 4.0, 4.5, or whatever. We're going to go to a system that will have two significant figures if this is adopted. But we calculate our class rank or class rank index or GPA to 3 or 4 significant figures. To me, that's wrong. We should have more ties, which it will create, but then they would be mathematically accurate.
and if you remember from last month, the recommendation is to move to 2 significant digits in terms of the calculation of class rank. And so that the GPA would go to 2 digits and the class rank would use that number, and we would round using conventional rounding to do that. Yep.
So then how would you determine the order if you had 5 ties?
They would be announced as ties. So if they are tied for second, because that would be the only place where obviously you're addressing, they would all be announced as second in the class. And that is possible, although it is unlikely at the top end. It is more likely in the center where you have lots of people tied for 110th, or whatever that number is, because there are more common GPAs in the middle than there are at the top and the bottom. But that is possible in
And
terms
then
of the
you're going to have
ties.
those 5 walk alphabetically?
So we will address that situation when we have the opportunity to address that situation, right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Rock, paper, scissors.
We'll have a cage match.
Nice.
So, at the end, there will be an opportunity for that, certainly. Yep, thank you.
Now we're on to the Senate Bill 1095, graduation option presentation with Dr. Scheid.
Thank you, Mrs. Cohen. So, I'm sure everybody's aware of the graduation requirement for Keystone exams and passing the Keystone exams. It's still a requirement that students take the exam, but there has been a lot of conversation, and there was a Senate House bill, Bill 1095, signed into law, and I really wanted to give you some context about how that started, where we are, and what we still don't know. So there are options. I'll go through those, but there's information that still isn't clear, and I want to make you all aware of that. So the bill was sponsored by Senator Tom McGarrigle, a Republican from Delaware, and what he was saying was he was emphasizing that the passage of the measure continues the important work of establishing a more thoughtful approach to high state testing and graduation requirements. Keystone exams shouldn't be the sole factor in determining graduation because they do not measure the range of aptitude needed to be successful in college or the workplace. So that's really the context of what this Senate bill was about. It was about giving options to students who may not be passing these Keystone exams, and we have been dealing with it as every other high school has dealt with it, students who do not pass and what options they have. So what you see on the screen are 4 options. And they get kind of complicated. I'm not going to go through every single piece of this, and this is why. Because I attended a meeting on Friday, and we were told PDE wants us to say this statement about graduation requirement, right? Because now we need to say, while what I tell you here is a summary of Act 158, the details, of course, will rest with the implementation regulations as provided by PDE. PDE has informed IUs that guidance and timelines for the implementation are still being developed. Specifically, PDE asked that the following information be shared with school districts. The Office of Elementary and Secondary Education program staff are working with working with the PDE legal team to interpret the requirements for implementation and will release guidance as soon as we can responsibly and accurately do so. At this time, LEAs, the school districts, may continue to follow their currently enacted local graduation policy. So while we were very excited to be able to share this, we were told to give you that statement. But the good news is options are better than no options. So, for example, and I'm just going to briefly go over them, knowing that we haven't gotten the guidelines and also knowing the expenses that will be involved. So the fiscal impact of this, so the Department of Ed has indicated it will need additional staff to administer the provisions of this bill at the estimated cost of $125,000 annually. In addition, the department estimates a one-time cost of $75,000 for information technology changes. Finally, the department will need to hire a contractor to determine the standard setting for assessments at an estimated cost of $250,000. So just wanted to give you the context of all of this. So that said, the options, you pass the test, that's great. One of the options then would be a composite score on all 3 of the exams. So the algebra, the lit, the bio. The students would have to have at least 1 proficient and nothing under basic. So 2 basic and a proficient. You could pass that way. The option 2 requirements, pass a course associated with the Keystones, and it's not determined what the score would be yet, but a certain score on a standardized test or successful completion of a college level course in that particular academic content associated with the Keystone, or acceptance to an accredited 4-year nonprofit institution of higher ed. Option 3, which is what we do now, this is for the students who attend the tech school, pass a class in the content area, pass the NOCTI, an industry-based competency test, and we currently have that in place for our students who go to the tech school, so there's nothing different there. And option number 4 would be pass the course associated with the exam, and then in addition to that, 3 pieces of evidence that reflect readiness for post-secondary engagement consistent with the student's career goals, and or acceptance to an accredited 4-year institution, or the second option of a letter guaranteeing full-time employment. So the big picture is the understanding that the keystone isn't the end-all. A single test score isn't going to tell anybody whether or not they're going to be successful in college or career, and that they're expanding the options. And I think it's a respectful thing to do for students. So while there's still glitches in here and we don't know the final answer on all this, the good news is that there are options for our students. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. And as I get further information, I'll provide it from PDE.
So, first I just want to say this out loud because it makes me laugh. So you can graduate from high school if you can show that you got accepted into a college after graduating from high school.
Yeah. Accepted into a 4-year institution.
Okay. How does this affect those classes that we had? I remember Deborah Cotner-Davis doing a presentation on these classes that we had to have because for kids that didn't pass the Keystones, and then we couldn't have the classes that we should actually have. Does this help with that at all?
Yes, because we're not required to
So now,
do the project-based assessments.
well, as long as they fit into one of these other odd categories that don't necessarily affect everyone.
Well, no, because they would affect everyone. So school districts are no longer required to offer PBAs at all because there's nobody to score them. So we don't have to do them anymore, and we should all be thankful for that because that was
Yes.
pure drudgery.
Yes.
So we do not have to do that. Nobody has to do that. And as a matter of fact, you can't do that because there's nobody to score them.
So those classes now for next year, old stage.
There were students who, at that point, to do PBAs, project-based assessments. Those students were pulled and worked with particular teachers to get them through that. I don't know if maybe there's a confusion about the transitional courses that we were offering that we don't offer anymore. And that was particularly in science. Right, and integrated. And we stopped doing that, and then I'm going to share good news about the result of that, because what we did was we were having our special education students, and some students who just weren't performing, put into a class called Integrated Science that did not require the teaching of the standards based on that assessment. So we stopped doing that.
Because I remember us having that discussion, that it's not worth it to do that based on these tests. And I think it was right around the time that the superintendent from Westchester had issued that letter to
Yes, I remember
everyone
that.
saying,
Jim
I
Scanlon.
don't care
Yep,
about the testing and I'm gonna
Yeah.
do it this way.
that's right.
What about, so our there's still, I'm hearing kids that are taking the Keystones 3 times. Are we changing that process then? We're not going to make them keep retaking this test over and over?
They have to take it twice. And then for students with IEPs, then that's different. And that's already laid out in our program of studies. So you do have to take that exam twice, unless you're opting out for religious reasons. So we have the spring, and that's when students take the exam. Then the students who don't pass that exam, we have them take it again in December. That's the second time that it's offered, in December. So what we're trying to do is better prepare that group of students to take the exam the second time, so you're done.
Well,
If they don't pass the exam, we have written into our program of studies already is that they can do 2 things. They have to pass the course associated with the exam, and then they have to do certain modules in Study Island and pass them so that they can meet the graduation requirement. But as you can see, the graduation requirement is Yeah, it's not there.
Thank God. When you say pass, are you saying basic or proficient?
Proficient.
Okay, but on option one, the composite, you can have two basics and a proficient.
So-
So even if they get a basic, you're going to have them take it the second time?
No, when we can have option one, you can have two basic and a proficient. I was just talking about what we currently have in our
What you're doing
system.
now.
Yeah, yes.
And it
But-
doesn't mean any two basics and a proficient, it is a composite score.
It's a
So it depends
composite,
on how
right.
high your proficient is and how high your basic is. So
Right.
it doesn't just mean you only need one proficient and you can pass with two basics, because it is a composite score, so they'll
Okay.
do some fancy
But it'll
math
help.
to make sure your number matches.
Okay.
So are students going to be required to take it the second time if they don't pass it the first time, or is it a choice?
They have to take it a second time, to my knowledge. I don't think they changed that. So you have to
So
take it
that's
the
not our
second
rule,
time.
that's a
That's
PDE.
their
That's
rule.
their-
That's PDE. And if they change that, I'll let you know.
What if they all of a sudden have a religious exemption between test one and test two? Does that work?
They could convert.
They could-
Then it's a religious exemption and they don't take that exam.
So how are we preparing them? Are we preparing them outside of their classes? You said, because you said in between, we're preparing them so they can so that they can take it in the fall.
The study island.
Right, so they are assigned modules. I'll talk more about that when I do the next presentation, but I'll just give you kind of an overview. So CDT's, Classroom Diagnostic Tools, and I think some of you may have heard that before. So what the state has done is they designed classroom diagnostic tools that mirror Keystone exams, right? So these are tests that you can take online. And what they do, they're diagnostic. So students take that exam in the beginning of the year so you can diagnose who knows what they need to know, and they move on and you don't continue teaching things they already know. Then you know who hasn't acquired those skills. So then you can direct your instruction to meet those particular needs, which is what we started to do in bio, and we're seeing the results, which is why we're moving to lit and algebra. But I'll talk more about that in the next presentation. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for your patience with this.
Oh, well, this is a long time coming. They